Hello, thanks for joining me at the PBM and Tinnitus Lab channel. I'm Dr. Katoyun Montazeri, and this is the seventh session of the triggers and improvers of tinnitus. In this video, I will talk about the sensory and environmental triggers of tinnitus. Tinnitus is extremely sensitive to sensory inputs and your surrounding environment. For many people, these environmental factors don't cause tinnitus from scratch, but they turn up the volume on an existing signal by overstimulating the auditory system or lowering the brain's filtering ability. So if you know more about them, you can better manage your tinnitus. As you can see here, there are many sensory and environmental triggers for tinnitus, and you couldn't even thought of some of them. They are including sound exposure, sudden sound change, frequency-specific sounds, silence. Yes, silence can be an environmental trigger, visual and sensory overload, biometric pressure and weather, air travel, and altitude changes, temperature extremes, allergens and air quality, electromagnetic and mechanical vibration. It is rare, but it is real, and smells and chemicals. All of them can be the environmental triggers of tinnitus. In the first video of this series, I talked about the noise trauma and sound exposure as a trigger of tinnitus, but because it's very important and it is the most common trigger, I'll briefly touch upon this topic here. Sound exposure occurs in concerts, clubs with power tools, sirens, and fireworks, and it can damage or overstimulate inner hair cells, and it can create temporary or permanent changes in auditory nerve firing. At first, it is temporary, but after the repetitive exposure, it can be permanent. And the brain always wants to keep its balance, so it tries to compensate this damage by amplifying the internal sound or the phantom sound of tinnitus. You should note that even brief loud exposure can cause a tinnitus spike. One of the other kind of sound exposure is sudden sound changes. For example, in door slamming, clanging dishes, notification sounds, and sudden applause. All of them are sudden sounds, and they can evoke starter reflex. Starter reflex is a kind of defensive reflex. It is common in all of the mammals and in human being, and it's the sudden movement in response to a sudden stimulus. For example, jumping in response to a sudden sound stimulus, and it is the basis of confirming occurrence of tinnitus in the animal models. I will explain it. I have explained it in my article, in my animal study, and if you want, I can explain about this reflex and recognizing tinnitus in animals by assessment of this reflex in a full video. So sudden sound can evoke a startle reflex, and the startle reflex activates the limbic system, and limbic system assigning emotional significance to sound. So because brain perceives tinnitus sound as a threat and focus on it, and the ability of filtering is reduced in this with sudden sound stimulus. So it can trigger your tinnitus. And also repetitive or constant noise, which can be seen in traffics and fans and HVAC humming and machinery noises can trigger your tinnitus, because these sounds fatigue auditory neurons and reduces the brain's ability to suppress tinnitus afterward. So these repetitive or constant noise can reduce the brain's filtering ability and ignorance of tinnitus sound, so they can trigger or amplify your tinnitus. One of the other triggers are frequency-specific sounds, including high-pitched beeps, certain music tones, whistling, and alarm sounds, because they may match the frequency of your tinnitus, and so they reinforce the same neural circuits already misfiring. It's very important, and they are very important triggers, because they can match your the frequency of your tinnitus. Silence can be a trigger itself, because, for example, in quiet rooms, living in quiet areas, and noise cancelling headphones without sound, all of them can trigger tinnitus, because the brain has no external sound to compete with the tinnitus sound, and the auditory gain or the auditory sensitivity, the auditory neurons sensitivity increases, and tinnitus becomes more noticeable, not louder, just unmasked. One of the patients told me that because he used to live in a very quiet area, and he used to wear earplugs during sleep, the tinnitus began in this patient. So silence can be one of the environmental triggers of tinnitus. Visual and sensory overload, for example, in bright lights, fast screen scrolling, crowded environments, busy visual patterns. These items share pathway with sensory system, and sensory systems share processing resources with auditory system, and the overload increases brain arousal, and the perception of tinnitus increases because of this brain arousal. Biometric pressure and weather triggers, can be the triggers of tinnitus. For example, storm fronts, rapid pressure drops, and high humidity, because they can affect middle and inner ear pressure, and they can irritate eustachian tube function, And I made a full video about the role of eustachian tube dysfunction in tinnitus. Please watch the full video. This irritation of eustachian tube can be one of the important triggers of tinnitus. May happen after a flu or in biometric pressure changes or weather changes. And also, these changes can alter blood flow dynamics. And I told you in the previous video that your inner ear is highly dependent to the blood flow dynamics and the balance of the electrolytes. Air travel and altitude changes. For example, during takeoff and landing and mountain driving, the tinnitus can be amplified, and because of the rapid pressure changes that can strain the middle ear, and also it can inflame inner ear structures if pressure doesn't equalize well. Many of the tinnitus sufferers, especially the ones with eustachian tube dysfunction, always complain about amplifying their tinnitus during takeoff and landing of the aeroplane. But some of them, when use earplugs during takeoff and landing, the tinnitus don't become amplified. Temperature extremes, for example, in very cold wind and extreme heat, these extreme weathers can affect blood vessel constriction and dilation, and can increase inflammation or nerve sensitivity, so they can affect and influence your tinnitus. Allergens and air quality, for example, pollen, dust, mold, and air pollution, they can cause nasal and eustachian tube inflammation and leads to imbalance and auditory irritation, pressure imbalance and auditory irritation. Electromagnetic and mechanical vibration, as I told you, this factor is rare, but it is real. Heavy machinery vibration and prolonged vehicle vibration can affect bone conduction and bone conduction stimulation, and somatosensory input feeding into auditory pathway, so they can affect perception of tinnitus. The last one is are smells and chemicals. For example, solvents, strong perfumes, and paint fumes. They can trigger a nervous system arousal, and some chemicals are mildly neurotoxic at high exposure, so they can trigger tinnitus. They can influence your tinnitus. These are the references of this video, the references about the effects of environmental sensitivity in chronic tinnitus, and triggers of tinnitus, and also the effects of limbic system and the role of limbic system in tinnitus, about the mechanisms of generation and perception of tinnitus. I try to simplify these topics and make them understandable for all tinnitus patients. Thanks for watching me. This is the next video will be about the psychological and perceptual triggers of tinnitus, and it will be the last video from this series. In 8 comprehensive videos, I tried to cover the primary and common triggers of tinnitus. I hope that these videos can be helpful for tinnitus patients. If the videos are useful for you, please suggest the channel to the other patients and subscribe the channel. Have a nice time and stay tuned.